evening. I am Dr. Elizabeth Ford. I'm the District Health Director for DeKalb County, and I just wanted to welcome you here first tonight to the Human Trafficking Summit on this beautiful campus, Agnes Scott College. First, I would like to introduce our beautiful a cappella group called Nocturne, and they're going to give you a musical selection. So please give them a welcome. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright, blessed day, the dark, sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them go. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Good evening, everyone. So this evening, as we become more educated about the atrocities of human trafficking and what we can do to help as humankind, we're reminded as a group of the echoed struggle that human beings have gone through century after century. So the next song we're going to be singing is called Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's nicknamed the Black National Anthem because it is a song of power and of rallying of people who have gone through struggle, and we thought that would echo well at this event, so I hope you enjoy. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you. So we are here this evening to gain some information about a very serious topic, human trafficking, also known as human sex trafficking, also known as DMST, domestic minor sex trafficking, which by definition is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act. It's also called CSEC, which stands for Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children, but what it really is modern day slavery. Why are we here tonight? Because Atlanta is one of the top 5 in the United States for sex trafficking. Why? Because we have one of the largest airports in the nation. We have a lot of conventions here, and we have a lot of entertainment. This is one of the stripper capitals of the Western Hemisphere as well. In Atlanta, child sex trafficking is a $300 million industry, bigger than the drug and the gun trade combined. This is why we're here tonight. Every month, they recruit 200 to 300 new boys and girls to participate in sex trafficking. So tonight, you're going to see some wonderful speakers. You're going to hear from people who have actually been trafficked to understand what that's like. You're going to learn the risk factors. Parents, mothers, I want you to understand what to look for, because I think we have a mindset of who we think is being trafficked, and it's not. It's everybody, and so you need to understand what your level of risk is. We're also going to speak with the DA's office, who will give us some data on trafficking and what they're doing to try to combat it here in DeKalb County. We're going to hear from Health and Human Services from the federal level. What are we doing to address human trafficking in the school systems? And then finally, you can't talk about any of this without talking about a solution. So we're going to have information on resources and what we need to do as a community to address this extremely controversial issue. So this has been such an amazing collaboration. Those who know me well know I usually just get ideas and then I try to find somebody to help me make it happen. This time it really worked to the nth degree. And so we are so lucky to have this beautiful campus and this wonderful partnership. And so I would like to bring forward to you now to provide greetings, the president of Agnes Scott College, Dr. Elizabeth Keish.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ford, and greetings to all of you, and thank you to Nocturne. This is literally the first time I've heard you all. They're a new a cappella group. Oh my gosh, they knocked my socks off. And I just want to tell you how thrilled Agnes Scott College is to be hosting this, what I hope is a first of a series. I think this is a problem that's going to take time to address, and I hope that we can do it again. I hope it's the beginning of an ongoing partnership. But we are really honored to be hosting this summit and to be partnering with the DeKalb County Board of Health and with so many extraordinary governmental and non-governmental organizations who are working together to combat this terrible, terrible problem that is so much in the shadows. And as I think about our mission at Agnes Scott, we have a beautiful mission to educate women to think deeply, live honorably, and engage the intellectual and social challenges of their time. It's one sentence, very powerful. And you think about what are the intellectual and social challenges of our time. Well, human trafficking is one of the most profound challenges of our time. And my own scholarly work is on human rights, and I know that so often with problems like human trafficking, like the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, like slavery in this country, these appear to be, because they're so insidious, they're so profitable, there are so many people who profit off of them, and who are involved in them, and so they appear to be intractable problems. And yet we know from history, and as the beautiful singers here sang about hope and faith, we know that when people build strong collaborations and powerful networks, that they can change the world, and they can take something like human trafficking and actually eradicate it. And I think, it's going to make me cry. There is no issue more important for the students of Agnes Scott. Excuse me. And for the human, I don't usually cry, as the students will attest, but this one's going to make me cry. Because truly, if there is something that we should dedicate our lives and our energies to, it is this issue. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Ford. Thank you very much to Amy Patterson. Let's give her a huge round of applause, our wonderful public health professor. And I know it's taken a lot of our public health students as well that have been involved here. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to learning a lot with all of you tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Keish. So next we have coming up to provide a welcome is Mrs. Zola Thurman. Mrs. Thurman is the president and CEO of the Milan Group, which is a management consulting firm that specializes in planning conferences and events for all branches of government. They also provide job readiness, customer service, and staff development training for higher learning institutions. Mrs. Thurman was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and moved to Atlanta, and she was a Kent State University grad. She worked with the Coca-Cola Company for several years in marketing research. She was also appointed to Governor Joe Frank Harris's Minority Affairs Division. Her biggest passion is working with the aging population and with children. She has a number of volunteer organizations that she works with. She is also married to our DeKalb County CEO, Michael Thurman, and they have one daughter, Makaya, who is a television news reporter in North Carolina. Please welcome Mrs. Thurman.
I am so proud to see so many young faces here, and I think that we should give ourselves a hand for participating in this event. Would you give yourselves a hand? Also, I would like to give Madam President and also Dr. Ford for collaborating and pulling this event together. It's just amazing that they could work this hard for such a worthy cause. So I want to recognize both of you and thank you for partnering to do the summit. Give them a hand, please. Good evening and welcome. I want to let you know that tonight as we sit here, the state of Georgia has about 100 ladies per night being exploited for sex trafficking tonight as we sit here. And so it is important that we deal with this issue, and I thank you for inviting me. I didn't realize the importance and how deep this would be. So I want to make sure that I am available and my husband is available to give you any kind of support that you need. And according to the DeKalb Health Board, human trafficking in Georgia alone has become, and you saw the numbers, a $300 million industry and a serious public health issue that needs to be addressed. And then that's why we're here tonight. So on behalf of DeKalb County and my husband, Michael Thurman, we welcome you. We thank you for your participation and taking time out of your schedule. And Dr. Ford, Dr. Kiss, whatever you need, we're in support of it. That's money.
You heard it. It's on film. So I have some powerful speakers coming forward. This is going to be amazing for you all, I think. It's not just about providing you with information tonight. If everyone does their job well tonight, I want you to be shocked. I want you to be horrified. I need you to be angry. But I also want you to be equipped, because you need knowledge and then you need power. Because you need power to know what to do if you suspect someone is being trafficked or if you know for sure they are. You need power to guide them to whatever resources we have available. And you see we have a lot of tables out there that will provide you with resources, and you're going to hear more during the panel. But most importantly, You need to leave here with power yourself to stand up and say, this is not going to continue in this community. It's not, we have to make a stop. When you hear these stories, you are going to feel so empowered to want to do something. And so I'm really excited that we managed to get this group of women together. You know, I'm all about girl power, and this is some real girl power going on right here. So let me introduce our next set of speakers. I'm going to ask them to come to the table. We have Tupiza Ivory Ivy, who was born in Detroit, relocated to Atlanta. She's the eldest of 4 children, married to a police officer, and together they share 5 children. She has an associate's degree in human relations, and she was entrusted with the gift of intercession. And she founded the Chosen Ones Incorporated in 2014. She has a book that she and her daughter wrote together, and you'll see it outside. Very powerful. And a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is mother-daughter relationships and mother-daughter interactions. And so I think that her story is going to be very powerful for you to hear. The next speaker is Ms. Dorsey Jones. And Dorsey is a graduate of Morris Brown College, where she obtained a BA in criminal justice. She is currently a probation officer with the Fulton County Juvenile Court, where she can serve out her passion to rescue young girls in trouble and to encourage them to discover their true potential and believe in themselves. She wrote a book as well, and her book is called The Angels Were Crying, Stretched Beyond Measure. I will tell you that every 3 pages, I cried over and over again when I read that book. It is very powerful as well. She takes you on a journey of her life as a little girl whose living conditions were so deplorable that she would run away from home, hitchhiking. She hitchhiked across 2 states at age 12, looking for her dad's family. She tells a story of a scared, humble, yet tough little girl who was truly rescued by angels. And so they actually have a connection that I'm not going to disclose right this minute, but as they tell their stories, it's going to be pretty incredible. So I'm going to ask Ms. Ivy. Her daughter was supposed to speak tonight, but she was unavailable. She was called away on an emergency. And so Mrs. Ivy is going to give her perception of how things went with her daughter. And then Ms. Jones will kick in and show how they're connected. Please welcome them both.
There we go. Good afternoon. Again, like everyone else, I thank all of you ladies and gentlemen for coming. This means so much to me. As Dr. Ford has mentioned, and thank you, Dr. Ford, for allowing me to come out. As Dr. Ford has mentioned, my daughter at the age of 14 was exploited. And how it all came about is that she was at a train station here in Atlanta, and she was waiting on the train at Christmas when she was 14 years old. And a gentleman that was 15, he approached her, and while she was waiting on the train, and when he approached her, he just kind of gave her some smooth talk. And he, you know, got her name, got her number, and they talked, and before you knew it, he had convinced her to go back to his place with him. And she thought that they were just going to do whatever 15 and 14-year-olds did at that time. And when she got there, it turned out that this 15-year-old gentleman was working for a pimp. So his job was to go out and pull in other girls his age. So when they saw him, they didn't see a pimp. They saw their counterpart. And so when she went in, he took her upstairs. And when he went upstairs, they had sex. And when he came out, there was a line of men outside the door. And one by one, they had sex with my daughter. And from hearing her story, it's unimaginable what she went through. And to find out that this gentleman was 15 years old, because again, we do have a perception of what these guys look like. And there's this thing where there's not only 15-year-old guys, there's not only black guys, there's girls out there that's calling other girls in. They're befriending other girls to convince them to do this thing. So it looks brighter or bigger than what you can think or imagine. But going forward, she ended up, one of the things that we had to do is that we, of course, went through the court system. And some of the services that the court provided proved to be very, very helpful. So I'm thankful for all the counselors in the room, all the probation officers in the room, all the police officers, the teachers, and just the men and women who take time to learn about this issue and to embrace individuals who have been affected by this. And I know sometimes we think, okay, well, what, you have your perception of what a prostitute, quote unquote, looks like. But what I've discovered is, and what I learned is that at 14, you're not a prostitute, you're a victim. And so I'm so thankful that people are learning more about it, because when I was pulled into it as a mother, I had no clue. I had no clue that my daughter suffered from a lot of the symptoms that put a girl at risk. She suffered from low self-esteem. And so I don't know how many of you in here have a 14-year-old, had a 14-year-old, and just thinking back to what it felt like to be 14 and not really feeling pretty and not feeling like you're worth all of that. And so my daughter, come to find out later, because I'm often asked, well, was there any warning signs? Well, I didn't know the warning signs. And so that's part of why we created the organization, to kind of give some of those warning signs. I didn't know her having low self-esteem put her at risk. So when the gentleman, the 15-year-old guy, came up and told her that she was pretty, and he, began to be suave and just finesse her, then it was kind of easy for her. And so another thing that I'm asked is, when you look back at it in hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently? Of course it is. Of course it is. I would have pulled her in a little tighter. I would have loved her a little harder. And I would have done quite a few things differently. And so, but one of the things that we had to do is, once it was reported, we had to go through the court system. And going through the court system, I met Miss Dorsey Jones. And this is Miss Dorsey Jones that's sitting here next to me.
First of all, I want to say that it is truly an honor and a privilege. And I thank everybody, the president of the college, Dr. Ford, the young lady in the yellow jacket, for giving me the opportunity to come today. When Lakia came into my office, I was a probation officer, and I was assigned to the moderate unit. And at that time, I came from Bainbridge, Georgia, which is South Georgia, and I didn't want anybody in Atlanta to know that I sold my body from 11 years old till I was 18 years old. I didn't want anybody to know that I slept with over 200 and something men before I turned 12. I didn't want anybody to know that I suffered with low self-esteem, that I hitchhiked from 12 years old to Norfolk, Virginia, looking for my family. So when I came to Atlanta, I stayed with 32 different families in Bainbridge, Georgia, and I was told that I could never be nothing in life. And I believed that with all my heart, that I could never be nothing based on where I came from. So the family who took me in their home, I had graduated from high school, but my grade was so low that I didn't have an opportunity to go to a college. So I came to Atlanta to go to Job Corps. And I heard about Morris Brown College, my 21 days at Job Corps, and I actually talked my way into college, and I got in. The guy who I asked could I be a student there, he denied me 7 times. He denied me 6 times. So on the 7th try, I waited until he went to lunch, and I studied his habit. And and on the 7th day, he went to lunch, and this new guy asked me how could he help me. And I told him I just wanted to go be a student here and have an opportunity like everybody else. So he called my high school, and my guidance counselor, who took me from sleeping outside on the merry-go-round, told him that her uncle was the first doctor in Bainbridge. He sat on the board of trustees, and they had to give me an opportunity. And that's what they did. They gave me an opportunity, and I made the best out of that opportunity. But still hiding behind the mask, not wanting anybody to know who I was and where I came from. I was given the opportunity to be a probation officer with Fulton County, and I had to work my way from the record room up to probation. And I got that too, because there's no way I could be here and I can't talk about the goodness of Jesus and all that he's done for me, because he truly had angels watching out for me. So when I became a probation officer, Miss Shoemate and her daughter came in my office, and I'm still hiding behind this mask, not wanting nobody to know that I used to do this with my body. And when they came in, she was quiet. You could tell she was reserved, but she had a lot of stuff going on. And her mom made sure that she came to every appointment. They were on time. And you could tell that she was fearful of not being disrespectful, because she had an aunt that worked in the detention part of the court, and she was no nonsense. Like, she just didn't play. So I knew that if she didn't do what was required of her, that I could go downstairs and get her aunt. But her mom was faithful. She made sure she came. And this particular day, she came in my office, and it was like I had to pull those layers and come from behind that mask and tell this young girl what I used to do, because they had already said that there was some concerns. She never did disclose that that's what she was doing, but all the signs were there. So on about maybe 2 months into probation and her beginning to know who I am and I'm beginning to know who she is, I sat down and I told them who I was. That was my first time telling a kid on my caseload who I was, but I wanted her to know that I looked like her, that I smelled like her, that I was her, and it was okay. So her mom called me and she says, Lakia didn't come home. I don't know where she is. And I was getting off work at 5 o'clock. I didn't tell my supervisor at the time that I was getting ready to go look for this kid, because I knew he was going to tell me no. So I took it upon myself to go into the streets and find her. And I was out late just trying to make sure that I found this kid, because, like I said, she reminded me of me. And something told me to go to Old National, because I think her mom had told me at that time that she had got information that she was on the Old National, but she wasn't for sure. So I didn't call my husband. I didn't tell anybody. I just did what I knew was right. And I started traveling down Old National, and right on Gobby Road in Old National, there was a Burger King. And behind that Burger King was a hotel. It was called the Howard Johnson at the time. So what I did was I parked my car at the base of the hotel, and I just watched. And I called her, and she picked up the phone, and I told her that I loved her, and I told her that she was special, and I told her that I was just concerned about her, because I had already seen her go into that hotel, because she had purple hair that day. And I said, don't be afraid. I said, I'm here. I'm outside. Just tell the pimp that you want to go to the store. Tell him you're going to the Shell gas station. So when she came out, I grabbed her. And I put her in my car. And I called her mom, and I said, I'm at the Chevron gas station on Old National, come. And I held her in my car until her mom came. And then I gave her back to her mom. And then they came to my office the next day. And of course, I got in trouble by my supervisor for not letting him know that I was, taking matters into my own hand. And with Lakia, she disclosed a lot of information, and she was hurt and just going through things, because like her mom said, she didn't feel loved, she didn't feel pretty, and those are a lot of the signs that she had. But I ended up leaving for the county juvenile court to start my own thing with my book and just advocating for children. And I just recently seen her in West End Mall, and it was just like years had passed, but it seemed like it was just amazing. And she was just telling me all the great things that she was doing, and that she had went to Alabama to go to college, and it was just a beautiful thing. And all I can say is God is good, and I'm grateful to be here.
I usually do plugs, but both of their books are so powerful. And so having read it, let me just say that I know them both from separate events. I heard Dorsey speak, and she had everybody literally just sobbing because her story was so powerful. So I knew that I wanted Dorsey to speak. And then I was at another event where Lakia was actually speaking. Well, you were both speaking. And so I said, well, I'm going to ask these two people to speak at my event. And then Dorsey called me and said, I know her. So I had no idea of their connection when I invited them to speak. So that to me made it even more powerful and more divine, because, who'd have thought with all the things going on? But let me just say this to you. This is a success story, okay? That's not the end result for most of these young ladies. So what you're hearing is a positive. I think there's some key themes here. A lot of it has to do with faith and having a person in your corner. If it's not your mother, it has to be somebody. And so that's why I say I want you to leave here empowered, because you might be that person that says, hey, what's going on with you? Why? She was sleeping on the playground. It was a teacher. And so we are such a society these days that doesn't want to be bothered and doesn't want to get involved and doesn't want to speak up. When you see things, you need to say something, because you might be the savior for someone. Let me ask you one quick question, because the key theme in both of you all's books had to do with what I call a generational curse. You both had mothers that were not involved with you, that were not nurturing to you. So dealing with adolescent girls can be a challenge. And so for the mothers in the audience who have teenage girls, what is your advice? Because there's got to be a line. Something has to go terribly wrong somewhere for you to be trafficked. It's not just a matter of hormones and girls being girls. So what advice would you have for someone who is struggling with their teenage daughter and may not feel comfortable right now coming up to you or asking you? What would you say to them?
Well, for me, my mom was the most influential person in my life because she was negative. And what she did was she empowered me to be powerful. And the most important thing, if you take nothing away from here, have conversation with your children and love them with every fiber that's in you. Love them. Love is so important. And we think that material things are important, but that's not what they're looking for. They looking for that hug. They're looking for that conversation piece. They want structure. And that just conversation, love, and support. And even when they do things wrong, don't be so quick to scold. Have a conversation with them and give them an opportunity to have a conversation back with you, because communication is key. And if you did something wrong or you felt like you did something wrong, you can't go back and erase it and it's okay, but just build from today. Just build from today and love like you never loved before.
I would add to that, because I was the mother who, because I came from a background where my mother really couldn't provide for us. So my biggest thing was to be able to provide for my children. I really didn't know what love looked like. To me, I bought you a pair of shoes. I kept you in a safe location, and so the hugging part, I left out. The telling her I loved her part, I left out. The embracing her and telling her what a good job she did, I left out. And I've always told her, I prepared her for if Joe Blow came up to her and told her, hey, you look good. But I didn't prepare her. I couldn't have prepared her for what eventually happened. And so for me, if I could give someone in the room, a mother, an aunt, a teacher, whoever in the room, is just being that support system. And one thing my daughter had to teach me is how to listen. Because sometimes she tells me things that's hard to hear. And as a mother, as a woman, you want to kind of jump in and you want to give the answer and you want to help. And she's like, Ma, sometimes I just don't need you to talk. I need you to listen. I don't need you to judge me. I don't need you to correct me. I don't need you to critique me. I just need you to listen to what I'm saying and take that and run with it. And I know sometimes some of these things is hard to hear what comes out of these women's and gentlemen's mouths. And so just being a listening ear and being consistent at being consistent. That's one of the biggest things that my daughter has, kind of taught me too. If you say that you're going to do something, honor your word, because coming from a background where you're being lied to all day long, if you go sit before a person who tells you that they're going to do something, they expect you to do it. As if your friend, sister, brother, cousin, counselor, teacher, whoever, whatever your position is, just be sure to be consistent at being consistent and being a good listener.
So let me just piggyback on that briefly. As a pediatrician, which I am, I focus on adolescent girls, and the judgment piece is important. You know, I always tell parents, your child has to be comfortable telling you anything. And you got to learn how to keep that face straight. And there are times when you're just going to go, but you can't, because if they feel like it's not safe to tell you, they're not going to tell you. That doesn't mean they're not doing it. That just means they're not going to tell you. So you have to have an environment where they are safe, where they feel safe. Even if later you deal with it, but at the time that it's happening, you have to give them a safe space where they can tell you anything. I am going to now, I actually have a little bit of time, so I have one question. If you all have one burning question that you want to ask. Yes?
Greetings. My name is Daniel Driffin, and I'm a student at Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm completing my MPH. Maybe can you guys speak to some of the characteristics of males being sex trafficked?
Let me just say that, yes, we have 2 African-American women up here, but that is a percentage of who's being trafficked. We're in DeKalb County, so that's why this is a predominantly African-American community. So I brought the demographics that we see, but trust and believe this is an everybody problem. I will give you an example. You know, we had the hurricanes last week, and as public health, we are in charge of manning shelters during hurricanes or any other disaster. DeKalb was hit, but we didn't get to the shelter point just yet, but we were sending staff throughout the state to assist other areas that were harder hit. Well, there was a shelter in Columbus. So my colleague in Columbus was telling us this story last week, and I just kept looking at her like, you've got to be kidding me. In the midst of this tragedy, in the midst of people, you know, all cohabiting in this shelter, there was a special needs girl who was 19 years old that her caretaker was trafficking her in the shelter, on the side of the shelter, in the midst of all of this. And so when I tell you this is a problem, I mean, who does that? How despicable do you have to be? But again, that's another risk factor. Special needs folks are always victims. And so you talk about people with low esteem, people who have family discord, runaways, homeless, girls who just like nice stuff. These are all possibilities for people who could be trafficked. Boys, the same thing. High percentage of transgender and gay males who are being trafficked. So this is an everybody problem. Let's give one more round of applause to Ms. Ivy and Ms. Jones. So next, I'm going to bring the amazing panel up. First up is Ms. Racine. Dahlia Racine is a Emory Law School graduate and a University of Florida in Gainesville graduate where she majored in advertising. She is currently the Deputy Chief Assistant DA here in DeKalb County. She has been with a program called DATE, which stands for DeKalb Anti-Trafficking and Exploitation. And she's been in that unit since its inception. To date, they have handled over 90 defendants charged with human trafficking or related crimes, and they have a 100% conviction rate. So in 2015, they created the Date Watch Task Force, and they brought together over 50 community partners. They were acknowledged by the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners, which declared September 27, 2016 as Stop Human Sex Trafficking Day in DeKalb County. She's everywhere. She trains law enforcement, prosecutors, service providers, and the community at large on sex trafficking issues. She's been in a number of different summits. She's spoken everywhere, including CNN, NPR, and a lot of local television stations and newspapers. Prior to joining the DA's office, she was a prosecutor with Fulton County DA's office for 7 years, and she was a senior assistant DA in the Crimes Against Women and Children Unit and Homicide Unit. Most importantly, though, she is a proud wife and a mom to 3 wonderful children and a great name. Please welcome Ms. Dahlia Racine. Next panelist is Mrs. Sharon Ricks, who was appointed the Regional Health Administrator for the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, and that's part of U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We are in Region 4. She has been in that position since September of 2016. That makes her the senior federal public official for HHS's largest geographic region. That's 8 southeastern states, 6 tribal nations, so she's over 64 million folks. Believe it or not, she began her federal career, which I still can't figure out the numbers, I'm counting, in 1986 as the high school, I don't know, U.S. Agency for International Development. In 95, she joined Health and Human Services, where she supported public affairs activities at 3 of the National Institutes of Health. In 2001, she joined the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Health, where she has worked to promote women's health, reduce infant mortality and human trafficking, prevent opioid overdoses, and prevent chronic diseases. And she's been a strong advocate for walkable communities, environmental justice, health equity, and she received her BS in journalism from the University of Maryland and her MA in journalism from Regent University in 2004. Please welcome Mrs. Riggs. And then our final panelist is Kendra Hansen, who is the Institute Services Director for Wellspring Living. All these good footsteps tonight. She's been involved in Wellspring since 2012. She came on staff in 2015. In the Institute, she trains and mentors organizations that are looking to establish a nonprofit that serve survivors of trafficking. She has a master's degree in education, and she's mentored over 20 organizations in their plans to open safe homes or drop-in centers for survivors. Her mission, along with the mission of the Institute at Wellspring, is to increase capacity for the care and restoration of survivors around the country by equipping and training staff, leaders, and community members. Please welcome your panel. So I'm going to start with some questions. Ms. Racine, I love all these acronyms, but just tell us what CSAC stands for. CESAC, what does that mean?
Sure, so it's actually SECAC.
I'm looking at it.
We love our acronyms. So CCAC stands for Sexual Exploitation and Crimes Against Children, which was formed in early 2017. You heard when Dr. Ford was talking about the Date Watch unit, which handled just human trafficking. There were a ton of cases coming in, and we could talk about why that was later, but what we did was we actually merged the 2 units, the crimes against children and the sexual exploitation cases. So we had more staff to handle it because the problem is so large. And the direct correlation was education and awareness. And that doesn't have to do with just the general public, but really with law enforcement. It was taking the old dogs and teaching new tricks, or taking the new recruits and teaching them what this really is, and taking it from, and I am sorry, I'm very blunt with my language, and I understand that we are in a chapel, but it was taking that terminology of saying, oh, it's just a bunch of young hoes out here too. These are girls that are being trafficked and victimized, and there are crimes being committed that don't work in isolation, don't work in a silo. It's not like they just commit trafficking and don't commit drug trafficking and don't commit aggravated assault and don't commit murder. So if you're going to truly understand the pulse of your community and the issues affecting your community, you need to understand what this is, what it looks like, and deal with it appropriately.
Ms. Hansen, yes. To go back to our audience question, who are you serving? Who are you seeing at Wellspring right now?
Sure. At Wellspring, we serve females. We serve confirmed victims of CSEC, which is commercial sexual exploitation of children, who are ages 12 to 17 in a residential program. But we also serve adults. We serve those at risk and those who are exploited. We have a residential program that we take ages 18 to 40. And then in our community program, we are able to take women of all ages. So that's who we serve.
Ms. Racine, so are you seeing males being trafficked here in the county?
So it depends. Very lawyerly answer for you all. What we know is that as many as 50% of CSEC victims are male. Vast majority are heterosexual males. The average age of entry for the male population is actually younger than the female population. It's 11 to 13 for boys, 12 to 14 for girls.
Did you get 11?
Yeah.
6th grade.
11 to 13. What we know is that in dealing with the male population, it's a subculture within a subculture. So if you had any of the vice unit officers here, they would tell you, yes, Racine harasses us all the time. Go get the boys, find the boys, find the boys. But there's a lot of red flags the second they get into those chat rooms, the second they're trying to arrange, because they don't speak the language. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. And so they're pretty quickly cued in to the fact that this is somebody who's not part of this world. With that being said, we have had a couple, and one of our issues that we have is actual resources for male victims of trafficking. We don't have, I don't believe there's any placements currently in Georgia, but there is one in Florida and one in North Carolina that if we found boys that we can place them, but currently in the state of Georgia, there are no resources for male trafficking victims.
So this is a report that came out from Department of Health and Human Services. It's called Human Trafficking in America's Schools. Mrs. Riggs, can you share with us the details of this initiative that is being promoted by HHS staff? Why was it important for your agency to target schools? And then how big of an issue is this in our school system?
So this report came out in 2015, and it really provides guidance for school systems on how do you address this issue of human trafficking. And it tells school systems they need to do three things. They need to increase awareness among the personnel in the school. So every teacher, every administrator, every bus driver, every cafeteria worker, every janitor needs to understand what to look for when a child might be trafficked. But then they also need to educate parents and students about how to prevent trafficking, what signs to look for. And finally, they need a protocol in place. So what do you do when a teacher or someone identifies someone who might be trafficked, and how does the school respond? So this report came out in 2015, a time when our office was just doing our first trainings in DeKalb County. We picked about 3 schools and we did a pilot project the same day that this report came out. So now fast forward to this year, we just got additional funding to pay for training of all the schools in DeKalb and Gwinnett. And so we're so excited that now we can make sure every teacher, every person that comes in contact with a student understands what they're looking at and knows how to respond.
Yeah.
So this report, Girlhood Interrupted, this came from Georgetown Poverty Law Center. And when I read it, it knocked my socks off. It's Georgetown University's Center on Poverty and Inequality, and it's called Girlhood Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood. And it uses a term called the adultification of Black boys and girls, wherein young Black girls and boys are perceived as being more independent, more mature, less needing of nurturing and protection, more knowledgeable about adult topics, more sophisticated than their white counterparts. And this manifests itself in terms of discipline in school. There's a sense that they should know better because they're more developed, that they know what they're doing, that they are a little more like you're enticing to an adult. So I wanted to speak to each based on your different perspectives and where you address trafficking from your perspective. Do you think this is true? Have you seen that? And if so, what are you doing in your specific fields to specifically address that?
Great question. So Dr. Ford was the one who first introduced me to this article. And it was an aha moment for me because I'd never had the term for what I had seen for years in the criminal justice system. And I'll talk specifically when it comes to the judiciary or even to our jury population. I didn't understand why it was that I would put a 15-year-old child in front of them to talk about how a 35-year-old man picked her up knowing she was a runaway, and instead of taking her home or taking her to the authorities, took her back to his apartment and sold her for blowjobs in the backseat of his car to pay to turn his lights on. And how the judge, after hearing all of that, and the jury coming back guilty, the jury sitting there before the judge and telling the judge, well, you know what? I mean, we think he might have just been at the wrong place at the wrong time. And her time serving that person. And this is a female judge who's doing this. And so it's devastating, obviously, to her as an individual. From a society's perspective, it's devastating. I think to myself sometimes when I'm dealing with my judges, based off of who my victims are, a lot of times they're young Black females who are my victims in my cases. And for some of the judges, I say, well, what if she looked like you? Would you take it more seriously? And that's a serious situation that we have. And I take it personally because I am raising Black children. And I know society looks at them different than they look at me. And it's not fair. And we have to do something. And I have to be honest, it's not just the whites that are judging the Blacks. Because I could tell you my harshest jurors are Black females. Looking at these babies and saying, I know she's fast, I know her type. And we have to address it, period, point blank.
Thank you. So as I'm thinking about this question, it makes me think about families that are already struggling and already broken. And I think about the reason our children, not only in a sexual environment, but just in general, carry so much more responsibility, carry so much more than other families, and have to help mom or help dad run that house or half run the house themselves. And so in a lot of ways, we challenge them and we grow them up a lot faster than they have to grow up. And so I think any initiative that we could do at HHS is initiatives around strengthening families so that children don't have to feel like they have to grow up so fast and have to deal with so many things they're not ready to deal with.
And I think for us in our environment, we see girls of all ages. We see girls of all races. I will say, based on our most recent historical data over the last couple of years, we do see a larger percentage of African American girls in our program. And what I can tell you about all the girls in our program is that they have been through this adultification, and really they are just children. They just want to do what normal teenage girls do, and I say that in quotes because, I mean, who hasn't had an experience that they wish they could regret? In many scenarios, we want to give them the opportunity to have what they might see as a normal childhood, something that they hadn't been experiencing outside of our program. We want to get them in school, which we do almost immediately. We want to get them on grade level and experiencing all of the opportunities that you would at a usual high school. And we do that by offering them different opportunities that they wouldn't get on the streets or maybe in the homes where they grew up. So we do a lot of extracurricular activities. We bring in a lot of experts. We want them to have a childhood. We want them to go to the Georgia Aquarium and see the whales and whatever else is there. We want them to experience roller skating with their friends. We give them these opportunities so that they can feel like children again. A lot of them have grown up in families where they do take on the responsibilities, and sometimes that just gets to be too much. And it's just too much for them to deal with, to handle. So we want to make sure also, I think it's really important to address that generational dynamic when we're looking at helping our girls recover by giving them therapeutic services. We want to make sure that we bring the family in. If the family is a safe place for them to go back to and that's where they're headed after they leave our program, we want to make sure the family's prepared and so that we're giving them all tools as a group to have success when she goes home.
Thank you so much. So, so Ms. Racine, you and I looked at a draft of some legislation that was proposed in Georgia called Sade's Law. And this legislation would have required minor children who are arrested, when they are bailed out, a lot of times they're bailed out by their pimps. And so this law would have required those who bail minor children out to provide some proof of a relationship with them, some either custody or something along that line. So this is proposed legislation. Now, upon review of it, there were some things that were left out because, first of all, sometimes those are the people that are trafficking you, might be your family. So my question to you is, do you think that legislation is always the best way to handle this? And if not, what is the best way?
I wouldn't say it's the best way, it's one of the ways. I think that there has to be a multifaceted approach in how you deal with combating human trafficking, right? Everything is tools. Everything is means to an end. So you all being here is a way to combat human trafficking, because now that you're going to be educated about this topic and you go into your various circles and spread the word. But legislation is a very powerful tool that we have in the criminal justice system for accountability, because just like child abuse, we have to stop the cycle somewhere, because oftentimes we do see intergenerational exploitation. And so we know that we have to say enough is enough at some point. And so when we have that powerful legislation that gives people like me the power to hold these individuals accountable and get a life sentence on these really severe cases, that's good. But I say all that to say that it's not just on our shoulders to be able to say, hey, legislators, this is a good idea. Or, hey, legislators, this is a good law that would be effective in the community. Because I could tell you that I started working these cases before there was a human trafficking bill. My first human trafficking case is when it was pimping a person under 18. And 3 years prior to that, it was a misdemeanor offense. And so I've seen it evolve. And I could tell you that when we first came to bat for this legislation, we were told that all we're trying to do is legalize prostitution. And it didn't matter what age those children were. And there was literally this woman who came in whose sister had been trafficked at the age of 15, I'm sorry. She was 15 when she was trafficked. And she said, I know my sister, and I know my sister wanted to do it. And for her to get a free pass is crazy. And so you don't understand the fringe and what your legislators are hearing. Because it only takes about 4 to 5 phone calls for them to feel like it's a priority topic. And you don't know who's making those 4 to 5 phone calls, because it could be somebody that's very ignorant. And so you need to be the voice of reason that they hear along with your collective groups and your friends, because it does matter. Because oftentimes we're left to feel like this is a process that we have no say-so in. But these are very tangible ways and very small effort on your part to say these laws matter. And there's a lot of resources in your actual booklet that will keep you up to date, like YouthSpark, who Dorsey works with. They're very good. And Wellspring, they're very good at letting the public know, if you tap into their websites, this legislation is coming up and this is important and this is a good one, so that you can then go and support it and let your legislators know. So that's a really long answer to say.
No, that was great.
Yes.
So to that point, I mean, and that's how I actually met Dorsey, was through United Way, as they were trying to get the whole Safe Harbor Amendment passed, Second Amendment, which has a whole bunch of different pieces of it that address trafficking and penalties. And so the power that you have is extraordinary, and you need to just know how to make it work for you, and be mindful that just because it's not you today doesn't mean it's not going to be you tomorrow. But speaking of resources, Ms. Hansen, let's be honest here. We have all these resource tables of all these different organizations. Let's talk about money. How are you funded? Who pays for you to operate?
Yeah, well, it is a multifaceted approach, I will say. We have a large percentage of grant opportunities, which are increasing thanks to people's awareness and opportunities available. We also are funded through donors, individual donors, churches, other groups of faith. And then we have retail stores that also help fund us. So those are the large chunks where funding comes from. And I would say that's similar, maybe except for the stores, for other groups as well.
So who are you not serving that you think you should be serving or you would like to serve?
Well, I think obviously boys. We do get referrals for boys. They're on the list of referrals for those under the age of 18, and we cannot do that at the moment. We know what we can do well and what we cannot, and so we're staying in our lane right now, but ideally that would be the ultimate scenario, is to be able to serve all youth who are at risk so that it stops and that it doesn't continue on further.
Ms. Ricks, so we talk about legislation. Do you anticipate any federal legislation coming down? I know, I'm sorry. I have to ask. I have power in the room. I need to know these things. Do you anticipate any legislation coming down specifically on the federal level to address trafficking?
Not that I'm aware of, but as she was talking, I was thinking about why are they need to be built out in the first place. I want to figure that out. I don't know the answer, and maybe you all can tell me, but the fact that your pimp is bailing you out, why were you incarcerated in the first place?
So, there's a lot of reasons for it. Even when you have, basically if you have a runaway status, you have multiple runaways, then there's like a point system in the juvenile justice system. And so Dorsey should be the one to speak about. Here you go. Come on. See, the DAR score. DAI score. And so basically when they acquire enough points, it's just like somebody having an outstanding warrant. Officers don't have any latitude to release a child if they have that many points, because at that point the child is considered a danger to themselves because they're chronic runaways. And there's a strong correlation between frequent runaways and being recruited into sex trafficking. The studies show, I believe, that 1 in 4 girls upon running away will be attempted to be recruited within 72 hours of running away from home. The scary thing is that now you don't even have to leave home.
Right.
How many kids have those little square brain suckers in their hands? And we're guilty of it too, right? Like we just had a conversation of how many times you go out to a restaurant, it's a whole entire family.
Right.
It's sitting there, everybody's on their phone or their device. But that's a huge way that kids are being recruited now. It's sitting in your living room, at your house, and then they'll run away because somebody encourages them to leave or whatever it may be. So that's a huge platform, and of course it's the #1 way that kids are being sold as well online. Backpage.com is the #1 seller of children here in the United States. And it's been that way for several years. Before them was Craigslist. After Backpage, we'll see who's next, because it's always going to be a very profitable platform.
So let's open up to some audience questions.
Hi. So I have a question about this legislative piece. So if we have laws in place now that say you're a victim if you're under 18, doesn't that supersede this runaway status? Shouldn't they be treated as a victim as soon as they intersect with the criminal justice system, and why aren't they?
So they won't, in the actual trafficking statute, you cannot be charged with prostitution, because you could still as a child be charged with prostitution in the state of Georgia. What happens now is that they have an affirmative defense that they cannot be charged with the prostitution or the directly related offenses. But what's sad is, like I said, these crimes don't operate in a silo. So they use these kids to be the gunman in armed robberies. I've got girls on my caseload that they're my human trafficking victim, but they're facing murder charges. They're my human trafficking victim, but they have carjacking charges. They're my human trafficking victim, but they have all these assorted offenses where they are offending on other individuals. And I'm not going to say that they're coerced into it. This isn't, necessarily a situation where they have a gun held to their head, but they are brainwashed into the scenarios that they're in. And so just because they're a human trafficking victim does not absolve them from all responsibility. Specifically to the runaway part, though, it is more of a provision to protect them. So the way that scenario plays out is under the new what's called CHIN's legislation, which is for the kids, they rewrote the juvenile code. And so part of that is that these kids can now be deprived, because obviously your home situation, your guardian cannot keep you at home for whatever reason, whether it's the guardian's fault or not. They can't keep you under control and keep you at home. And so we need to intercede to try to prevent you from being exploited. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but from there what they are is DFAC steps in. Do you need wraparound services at home? Do you need to be placed somewhere else that is safer for you? Do you need to go to Wellsprings because you already have a lot of signs and symptoms of being a trafficking victim and you need those services? So that's kind of where it is, not necessarily just to incarcerate them outright.
Hi. As a social worker who works with trafficking victims who are adults, and my background is in domestic violence, coercion isn't necessarily having a gun held to your head. Mm-hmm. Coercion is, if you don't do this, there's a consequence for you, and that consequence might be death. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if legally you can't use coercion. You would know that. But what I'm finding is that a great deal, a whole bunch of things. What I'm learning is that a lot of the women who are over 18, have a history of being trafficked, and first victims of molestation, and then became trafficked. And it hurts me when Survivors say, like, I had sex with this many men. It's like, no, you didn't. You were raped by that many men. There is no consent involved in that, especially with children. And even when you move up to, to what we consider prostitution, because it's over 18, there is rarely a consent situation. It's, they are being coerced or forced by another person to engage in this. And I believe that the girls who, and the boys who are being molested and prostituted at a young age, I truly believe that their physical brains, their brain scans would look completely different than a child with an average life. Their needs are so extreme. And that's what I've been learning about trafficking victims, is that there's so many different arrays. And because I work at a domestic violence shelter, that's where they house, that's where they're housing a lot of, some of the victims. And we're finding that their needs just far exceed the need of your classic battered woman.
Absolutely. And just to answer that, and I think there's a question all the way in the back. With coercion, the Lemery decision defined that really broadly for us here in the state of Georgia, which is great. So it could be emotional dependence, financial dependence, it could be drug dependence, because a lot of our victims are either getting into this to support the drug habit or pick up the drug habit to support the lifestyle. Because as a woman could know about her own body, to physically have to lay down with 10 to 15 men a night, you cannot physically be in yourself, in your head, in your space. And so a lot of mind-altering drugs, drinks, whatever it may be, are often utilized by our victim population.
Good evening. My name is Michael J. Cleveland, Morehouse School of Medicine MPH program. Recently on television, a popular series show called How to Get Away with Murder, Annalise defended an actual case that dealt with sex trafficking victims and how the court system basically put the lady into the perspective of always going back to prison, always being in jail. So it comes to mind that you mentioned the brain suckers, as I got mine in my hand. How is DeKalb County using social media to help inform teenagers of what to expect? And this question can go to all three of you all. I know you have your different grants and nonprofits. So what are you doing on not from the parents' perspective, but what are you doing out there on the internet to help get the message out there to the kids?
So that's obviously key. I don't know if you're from Georgia or not, but welcome to the South. And talking about sex in schools, we can't even get sex education, let alone talk about selling sex. And so it's one of the hardest things. I mean, they've done phenomenal work in getting the school staff trained. But when I tell you those kids could teach all of us a couple of things about what sex trafficking looks like, and so one of the biggest issues we have is getting into the school populations. What we try and do is kind of circumvent all the rules and policies. So if it's a extracurricular group and they want to bring us in after school, some other after school program, we'll go and speak to them. And the populations that I love speaking to are what's labeled the at-risk populations, because I tell them, understand the target is on your back. You are the ones they are coming for because they believe that nobody cares about you. And so they're the ones that need the message, I think, the most. Not to say that nobody else is vulnerable, but I think they need to hear it the most. And I think, quite honestly, that Georgia has their head in the sand when it comes to this, when they're saying we're not going into the schools with this topic. And it needs to start not at high school, it needs to start at middle school. That's where our populations are starting to be targeted. So if you have a friend over in the computer engineering section that wants to start an app that we could spread on social media, by all means, let's do it. But if we want to go through the Department of Education, we have a long way to go.
Hello, my name is Calvin Pegas, Morehouse School of Medicine, Masters of Public Health. And I have two questions. So the first one is in regards to who's part of the human trafficking. I mean, you mentioned girls and guys, and someone mentioned transgender. And I'm just curious, how do you distinguish the signs? Because I know that for transgender women, they're marginalized. And so sometimes they're kind of driven to do a lot of sex work. And so how do you tell the difference between someone who's out there doing sex work, who can't get access to any other resources in terms of getting jobs, employment, and so forth, versus someone who's actually a part of human trafficking? And then my second question is also from a legislative standpoint. I know lobbyists are very important to drive a lot of issues in DC. And so are there any dedicated lobbyists that are pushing human trafficking forward?
You can answer the DC question. I don't know about DC.
Well, I was just thinking about the fact that if it's a child under the age of 18, whether or not you think they're making their own choice, that's never a question. It's always considered trafficking. You don't have to prove coercion. You don't have to prove brainwashing. They're under 18 and they're involved in this activity. So, yeah.
Strict liability.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what the reason is.
It's interesting that you bring up the different thought processes that may be happening in a different populations, but when the law comes into place, it's just straight. It's a child. Yeah.
And I haven't dealt with any cases dealing with the trans population yet. But again, it's that whole subsect within subsect scenario. And I think that it would be something that we would, part of our duty as law enforcement is to educate ourselves on these different topics and not to assume. And so if that case, when that case comes across our desks, I think at that point we need to reach out to the community to say, sit us down, explain to us why does this look this way, and help us to be able to explain it to 13 other strangers that have no clue what's going on. So that's where we would be. I don't know if you guys
Yeah, and I think we would say that would be survival sex. And so that is a way of someone meeting their needs when there are no other opportunities available to them. And so that as a system, societally, we are failing that person. If there is nowhere for them to go. I've already talked about our kind of exclusionary criteria. Every organization has their own exclusionary criteria. I know on the governor's task force on human trafficking, we're working on providing more and more resources and opportunities for youth who are marginalized, whether that's because of them being a part of the trans population or they're unaccompanied minors, but we are working on more and more resources.
Okay, a few more questions because we still have another speaker.
Yes, hello. My name is Mary Howard. I've had a background working in up north as well as here in Georgia in Child Protective Services. One of my frustrations is the sometimes irrational decisions that the judges make on the bench. And I know, especially like in Child Protective Services here in Georgia, sometimes the agency was blamed for decisions that the judges have made that was really inappropriate regarding the safety of the child. So I would like to know, is there a plan that before the judges sit on the bench, to be able to rule over some of these cases, that they receive any type of orientation, regarding basic dynamics in terms of child protective services and drug trafficking, for children?
So the judicial branch obviously operates on their own, and so we have tried to get into their conferences. They have statewide conferences as well. But I can tell you as far as in DeKalb, because my officers were getting super frustrated, they're putting 40, 50, 60 man hours into investigating these trafficking cases, go before the magistrate judge, and the magistrate judge dismisses the warrants because they don't think it looks like what they think trafficking is. So actually this month, we're starting in DeKalb to do magistrate judge trainings, and we're hoping that that will lead to us getting into other places. I've trained municipal court judges. We're just waiting on the big dogs to get to the superior court judges so that we can help them. What I have noticed is, with a rare exception, is that once we're able to fully try one of these cases in front of a judge, that's how they get their education, because we put up our experts, they hear from the girls themselves, and they get to see what it really looks like. And the vast majority of our judges we have put these cases up for, that is how they're educated, and we don't usually see them step back once they get that information.
I work in an elementary school. My name is Erin Parks, and I'm always struck by how everyone blames the kids for their behaviors, even at such a young age. Like in an elementary school, the first thing they're saying is these kids are bad, they need to get beat. So what kind of conversations can you have with people to help them remember these are kids? Like, I don't care how tall they are or how developed they are, they're kids. And I see like that's such a huge hurdle because, like you said, with the adultification, like you're having conversations with people and it's how many times do I have to say, they're 15. I know you have your opinion of how they look. So what advice do you guys have for us to convey that message? Like, they're kids. Like, that's all that really should have to be said, but it doesn't seem to register with people sometimes.
I feel like that's $1 million question. I mean, I feel like whoever comes up with that solution, you know, God bless you, because that's our constant struggle. I mean, on an individual, personal level and on a professional level. It's just getting people to understand kids are, like, physiologically, their brains are not developed yet to understand long-term effects of their decisions. So, I don't know, do you guys have an answer?
I adopted 3 teenagers from foster care, and so I had to go through training after training after training, even though I had 4 kids of my own. And not that every parent needs training, but some of what you learn in those classes, regular parents of biological kids need to know. You know, how to respond when your child's out of control, how to redirect their behavior, how to understand how they think. There's all kinds of education, but I think we need to promote that education to parents of biological kids as well.
And promote the trauma-informed schools movement.
So we're going to do one more question. No, we're going to open question. Let me just say, go ahead and ask your question, but we also have one more speaker, and then I'm going to bring everyone up at the end so you can all get your questions, and then we'll ask Dr. Keish to do a closing for us. So you got it.
All right, my name's Brenda Smith, and I'm the CFO at DeKalb County Board of Health. So my question really is, we see the victims and we see the men that, or the people who are selling the children into trafficking, but what are we doing about getting rid of the demand? Because if the demand, like I say, I'm a CFO and I know about supply and demand. So my question is, if the demand dries up, then there's no need for the supply. And I feel that the people who are customers, who are buying these services, get off real easy. And there has to be something to say, this is not acceptable for you to be the purchaser of these services either. So what's going on in that realm? That's what I'm question.
So that is very well recognized. And there's several organizations and entities, including the statewide task force that's working on demand reduction, Youth Spark, Street Grace. There's several organizations that have banded together to say we need to stop the normalizing of sex buying. Because the way that it's usually referred to is, oh, it's just the world's oldest profession. It's just my son's way of, you know, getting that first time out of the way, or whatever it is. It's always minimized, because even in what we call the buyer, the John, we minimize their role in all of this. So again, when I'm talking to my vice folks and my ICAC people when they're running their ops, I'm saying, go get the buyers. Let's go get the buyers. And just this year, we had our first buyer trial, and he got life. He had a 15-year-old special needs girl that he had perform oral sex on him in a bathroom. And he refused to take any plea, and I refused to come off of any offer. And so we went head to head, and you know who won. So it starts with that. It starts with that messaging to let them know it is no longer acceptable. You're not going to get the free pass. We're going after the escort services, the high-end areas where those are really the buyers that think nobody could touch me. I'm a multimillionaire. Who's going to say something to me? And we have let them know that they are now exposed, and your friends will be too. So there is a big push for that. The other issue that we have is that we need the men to talk to the men to say enough is enough. Too much as society, we sit here, and you don't have to be in the pimping culture to see that as a society we have more and more shifted our lens to women being property. You look at any of these ads that are up there, girls have hardly any clothes. I mean, I can't even go into Justice to shop for my 10-year-old because everything's showing a midriff and butt cheeks. And I'm like, can she have something to cover her up? And so you have to have that shift in, stop saying sex sells and then be so shocked of the conscious when sex sells. And so we have to shift that as well. And so just, you know, those tiny issues that we need to take care of. But yeah, it's fine.
All right. Give the panel a round of applause. But they're not done yet. So my final speaker is another survivor, Jada Welch, and she endured 4 years of being trafficked and has made it her life's goal to create a community center to help and educate girls. She's personally witnessed the perils of mental manipulation that often leads young girls astray. She currently attends Bruton Parker College in Newnan, Georgia, and she is majoring in theology. After graduation, she'd like to minister to teens through awareness training, life skills development, and mentorship. And she has a daughter, Shemaya, who attends Payne College. I want you to watch this vignette because this was done by our very own Emmy-winning Diamond Miller Lewis, who is part of DeKalb County Television. But this is a really powerful introduction to Ms. Welch, and then I'm going to ask her to come up and speak.
Every year, millions of women, men, and children are trafficked in countries across the globe, including right here in the United States. Referred to as the modern-day slavery, human trafficking generates billions of dollars a year.
We see the sexual abuse. We see spouses being trafficked by the other partner. We see children being trafficked by parents. I mean, everybody's story is different.
Oftentimes, victims are lured in by a search for love from outside. What they find is a world of sex for money, manipulation, and abuse. Other times, trafficking can start much closer to home.
At 5, my mom was mine. She sex trafficked. She put me into it. At the age of 5, I was having sex. She was letting me have sex with her boyfriends for drugs, for alcohol, or whatever she needed.
At age 10, Jada Welch presented a gift she had found and saved to give to her mom for Mother's Day. Instead of happiness, her mother responded with the accusation that Jada had accepted the gift from a John as a result of a sexual act without permission from her pimp, who again was her own mother.
That's when the physical abuse really got worse, but she tied me against the bed and beat me for 24 hours and put me in salt water. The state took me, but being programmed, happening with drugs and alcohol and having sex with different guys, I was running away from foster home, and then I met my pimp.
Jada spent years on the street being sold and eventually selling herself for money.
I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to be a kid.
Determined to break that cycle, Jada worked to provide for her son, who was from a previous relationship, and a daughter born from the very life she was trying to escape.
When my daughter came, even though I was having some difficulties because it was by somebody that, you know, I was like, God, how am I gonna do this? How can I look at her every day? How can I help me? And when I tell you, she is the blessing of my life, I named her Shemaya, the Lord hears out of the Bible.
Jada's search for faith led her to the spiritual guidance of Dr. E. Dewey Smith at Greater Travelers Rest in Decatur.
I was so comfortable because it was just like I was supposed to be here. And then the pastor started talking about the Tabitha house. He was like, women who have been sex trafficked. And I was like, they have that there?
We serve everybody. The survivors will call me at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I just needed to hear your voice to know that I still have somebody supporting me. And I answer.
Nicknamed Mama Margie, Tabitha's House Executive Director, Marty Gill, has been there since her own daughter was stalked at the age of 13.
And my daughter told me one day she went to the restroom, and when she came out, he was right in front of her face. And he would show up at her practices. Then she started getting messages on her little social media accounts saying, I'm watching you, and I'll steal you, and things like that.
A vision of Dr. E. Dewey Smith and Margie's response to predators, Tabitha's House opened its doors 3 years ago.
Tabitha's House will step in to provide, search and rescue efforts. We have had teams of volunteers go out to help look for children. And we have to break the bad news sometime to parents that your child may be trafficked.
Working to bring fresh air to families impacted by human trafficking, Tabitha's House offers intervention, mental health, and temporary housing to those in need.
Our youngest client has been 5, a 5-year-old child who had been trafficked by her parents to support a meth habit. You know, sometimes people will assume that it could take a few counseling sessions, they'll be fine. But I have to attend, and I have to be intentional in attending to the layers of the person, because we work with marginalized populations, we work with the ultra-rich. Human trafficking does not discriminate.
Resources coupled with compassion best describes the work of Tabitha's House, where the cycle of abuse and oppression is transformed into a cycle of solutions and of hope, such as with Jada, who has turned her story of despair into a source of inspiration for others.
You wouldn't believe how many girls come up to me crying, asking me, how can they get out? And it's just mind-blowing, because I didn't think that my story would be as powerful. I didn't think I would. I thought I was nothing.
Before Jada comes up to speak, I would like to welcome Ms. Marty Gill, who is the founder of Tabitha House. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jada Welch.
Good evening. How are you? Like my story. First of all, I want to give a hand to my daughter. She's here tonight, Shamaya. She's the reason why I'm able to be strong to do this. That's how I'm able to look at her every day, because it needs to stop. My mom did sex traffic me at 5. It has been a long journey mentally, physically, you name it. Whatever you want to ask me, you can. I'm open.
So let me start, Jada. Again, we have another story where the mother-daughter relationship just broke down. Why do you think that is? What makes you a different mom to your daughter?
Well, my mom, I had to look at it, when I got older, I had to look at it from her side of point, how she was treated and how she was raised. And so I made a promise to God that I was not going to do my child like that. And with the help of my family, I was taught how to be a mother. I mimicked them. I watched them because I didn't know how to be a mom. But I knew I didn't want that for my kids. So when my daughter turned, thinking like 10, I got out of it altogether, because I looked at her and I was like, I don't want her to do what I did. I don't want her to go through what I went through. So that's when I started getting help and doing what I needed to do.
So the other common theme that we saw among the other success stories is that one person or that group of people that was your savior, your angel. So who would that be for you?
Margie. Margie, she helped me through a lot. Because even though when you're in the system, they put you in counseling, they put you in therapy, but they don't put you through the trauma therapy. I mean, because we've been traumatized. I have been traumatized. I mean, just imagine being pimped by your own mom. And then, you know, after that, she abused you. She tie you against the bed and then put you in salt water. I mean, that was traumatizing. And on through the years, I mean, I was a trouble kid. I was a trouble kid. So my angel, when I got older, was Margie.
So how did you two connect?
Through church.
So that's the other thing, is some sort of spirituality. I know everyone may have different beliefs in here, but there's always some sort of higher power that you have to look to pull you out of these types of situations. And so that's the other thing. Do you have a relationship with your mother now? Fair enough. I'm going to ask Ms. Gill if you would like to get up and give a few words, if you want to share something about Tabitha's House and how it got started. Please welcome Ms. Gill, Marty Gill.
Thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to increase awareness. But one of the things that we aim to do is to eradicate sex trafficking. You may hear this over and over and over again, but it does take a village to make a difference. And when I say it takes a village to make a difference in the lives of young people, we have the same impact for adults. We can't forget about the boys. We can't forget about the LGBTQ population. There are so many people who are hurting, and sometimes it starts at home. Jada gave, her story. She told about everything that she, some of the things that she had to endure at the age of 5. She didn't place a lot of emphasis on the importance of familial relationships, but family is important. And tonight, I just want to say thank you to her family for being here to serve as her support, as her strength, to let her know that what she's doing tonight is making a difference in the lives of so many people. So I just want to thank them for coming. One last thing, with Tabitha's House, we have a resource center that's located on Black Shoals Parkway. And in the community, we are known as being placed in a hot spot. At any given time, we will have people who walk in off the street, and we don't know the underlying conditions that they're coming from. Some are severely strung out on drugs. Some don't even know where they are. I have had people in my car who I didn't know, but you know what? I'm not fearful. Because when you do the type of work that we do, I can't be fearful. I know where my strength comes from, and my strength comes from people like Jada. She doesn't know how much she strengthens me, but the people I assist on a daily basis, they know. And we have some other people who are here in the audience, but they know. And they can see that genuineness in you when you sincerely care. So yes, you're absorbing a lot of information tonight, but don't just absorb it, do something with it. If you see something, say something.
Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause. So since we had so many other questions, I would like to bring the rest of the panel back up. We can pull some other chairs over and everybody can be here to answer questions because there were a lot of hands up. So don't be shy now. Where's my mic lady? Come on now. So come on down, panel, please.
Or is this on? Okay, good. Hi, my name is Leah Trotman. I'm a first year here at Agnes Scott College. This question is actually for Ms. Racine and also for Ms. Hansen. So you mentioned that the population was 50% males. However, there was no resources or official programs in Georgia for male victims. Why is this? And then Ms. Hansen, you also said that when males are referred to your place of business, then you give them referrals. So where are those referrals to?
I think the short answer is funding. And then I think that also, like we talked about with sex ed not being in the schools, this is a very conservative state. So when you start talking about male-on-male sex, regardless of whether it's trafficking or not, finding funding to help those who are trafficking victims, I think it's a much harder sell, no pun intended, than for helping female victims of sex trafficking. But I think we're coming around. And there are resources, I don't remember the 2 states.
Yes, Florida and North Carolina. And then there are resources. There are group homes who are equipped and prepared to work with those victims of trafficking. They're not necessarily CSEC specific, which is like our program, But they are equipped and they have been through tremendous training in order to best serve those victims.
This question is for Jada. I'm a retired elementary school teacher. I want to know, how did your first grade teacher not know?
She didn't know. They because my mom had told me I couldn't tell no one. So I just went to school as if nothing happened. And the only way they really found out that something was going on, I went to school with bruises all over me, from my head to the toe, and I was still bleeding through my dress. And that's how they found out something was going on.
So, Jada, maybe to extend that question, how were you able to mask those emotions of what was going on at home? How do you think you were able to cope with that and act like everything was normal at school? Was it something that teachers may have been able to see if they were looking more deeper, that they might have been able to see? And another question to follow up is, have you had tried to leave the life before your baby girl turned 10, and what had happened then? What support did you have when she was 10 that you didn't have before?
With the first question, how did I mask? I was afraid of my mom. So, if she tell me don't say nothing, you better not say nothing. And so that's how it was. I couldn't say anything because either her or the guy she was with would do stuff to me, and I could never go outside. I could never do anything. So that's how I masked. I just was quiet. I didn't have a voice. The second question, I was enraged. I wouldn't really listen to nobody because I was always angry. It was really me, my self-will, to get myself out of it because I was tired. I was burnt out. It was me. Well, I could say it was God because I was tired. I was tired and I was burnt out, and I was just, it was God. It wasn't me. It was God.
Hold on. This is live, so we need to make sure everyone asks their questions into the microphone.
Thank you so much. My name is William Carroll. I'm a public health educator here in DeKalb. Been in public health since 2003. Initially started working with adolescent health, youth development, and now with the high impact HIV program here in the county. Ms. Jones, I'm from Camilla, Georgia. Margie is from Camilla, Georgia. One morning, 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, I was leaving DeKalb County, going back to Camilla, and I heard your story on the radio, and I was touched. And I'm blessed to be able to say that I'm here to hear you live. What I did was, after hearing your story, I took that information to our PrEP program, which for the Adolescent Health and Youth Development Program is our public health educator. It's our sex ed program and abstinence program, because that's something that we have been made aware of. It was 2007 the first time that I understood about what sex trafficking was and how it follows a lot of the major events that take place, whether sporting events, and that's one of the questions I'm going to get to as well. With the Super Bowl coming, as a county, what is it that we will be doing in order to prep to make sure that we are able to recognize, and as a county, as a community, what is it that we can do in order to help to service that and to help people get out? Coming from the HIV program, what we're trying to do is we want to partner with agencies. We partner with Tabitha's House in order to provide services after the victims have been rescued, for lack of a better word. So we want to know what it is that we can do in order to better partner with you all. And also who can, as far as the adolescent health department,
what is it that we can learn or can take back in order to help? Because those programs are throughout the state to be able to help with training or anything else. So I'm looking forward to partnering with any or all of you on both of those standpoints. Sorry for the multiple stack questions.
As to the Super Bowl, and we have a couple of big events coming in the next couple of years, we're definitely aware, we're definitely getting geared up. But obviously it's kind of covert as to what is being done for those things. But yes, we are definitely aware and preparing for them because there is a huge uptick. Girls are going to be brought in and boys will be brought in from all over the country to here to be sold for sex to people who are coming to watch the game or to hang out or whatever it may be. So yes, we are preparing for that. The rest of the question I will defer. But yes, training is huge. I think that training has been the key to our success, and we partner with anybody and everybody. We believe we're either the mouthpiece or the megaphone, whatever it is that needs to be done.
I would want to piggyback off of that with the Georgia State Human Trafficking Task Force. We are working together in a collaborative effort to, come up with some type of system to be able to address the Super Bowl. But it's not, we can't just wait until we get to that point. We have to be prepared even before that point. We have NCAA coming. We have so many conventions. Atlanta is number one for a lot of stuff. And it's because you can get in and you can get out because we have 20, 75, 85, the airport. But we have to do something in advance. But the statewide task force is coming up with a program that we would be able to address the influx of people who will be coming to the city.
Hotels are key for these big events. Every hotel in this city needs a poster up with anyone can know if you see something, here's what to do, here's who to call. We could catch a lot of them during Super Bowl, I think, if we focus on that industry.
So I'm going to speak on that also. The health department actually has flyers now because sometimes the pimps bring the young girls and boys in to get checked out. So we also have the notifications of trafficking. But tomorrow morning, ironically enough, I was invited to speak at another trafficking conference for airline employees. I'm not available, so don't clap because I can't do it. But someone is going, and I did review their slides. But because that's a big issue, and if you don't know, there was a young lady who was on a plane, and the flight attendant just had spidey sense that something wasn't right, and so she locked eyes with the young girl and motioned to go in the restroom, and in the restroom was paper and pencil, and the girl wrote, "Help me," and so by the time the plane landed, they got him. So we need to make, this is everybody's problem. You cannot just look away. You can't, because that's somebody's life that got spared from somebody just having a little extra initiative. She could have just not written anything in the bathroom, but she obviously was crying out, and so somebody heard her, and that's your job, is to hear. Next question.
My name is Lillian Patel, and first of all, I'm a certified teacher that has been teaching children in pre-K and kindergarten. And I just want to commend you, Jada Welch, for having the courage to tell your story.
Absolutely.
For a child that young, I know it's very difficult for them to be able to share what's going on and what's happening to them. But I, as a teacher, have found a lot of children by just having a show and tell and an opportunity for sharing, stories come out that you would not believe. So I just would like to say, God bless you for being able to have the courage and to be able to raise a child out of that situation. I also started a nonprofit organization in 1993, taking youth off the streets of Kansas City who were being suspended from school, had nowhere to go, and were ending up in trouble with the law, incarcerated or dead. It went from that to basically working for a crime prevention agency as a youth coordinator and having to go to the streets and search for a lot of these missing children or runaways. And one of the things that worked there was to be able to have an avenue, which was a radio station, where every Friday my director went online and announced the names of every child that was reported missing throughout the week. And within 24 to 48 hours, we were able to find the majority of those children. I heard you mention that at the beginning, that there are 100 children that are being trafficked on a nightly basis, but we don't hear about them now. So how do we know who to look for if we don't know that they're out there in the streets? I am just grateful to have had the opportunity to meet Dr. Ford just recently and to share with her that God has blessed me to be able to be offered an opportunity to host a radio program which is entitled There's No Place Like Home. And she was the guest this past Saturday. I still feel that I am and would like to continue to be the advocate for the children and to be able to get this information out there, because we don't hear stories on the news anymore of missing children on a regular basis. And I found how difficult it was just to get a story aired without having the support of the police department. So I commend all of you all for the job that you're doing, but I need to collaborate with you and to get back involved in what I was doing in the streets as far as reaching the children. So I would just like for you to know that that is an opportunity for all of us to be able to share your stories on Vision Radio 105.1 FM on Saturday mornings.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Madeline Kent, and I'm a senior here at Agnes, and I had a question about a specific community. So Atlanta and the surrounding counties have a significant international immigrant population, and I'm wondering if any of you could speak to the intersections and particular challenges faced when trying to confront trafficking with immigrant populations.
Different to deal with the immigrant population that are being trafficked. So we collaborate a lot with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, and there's unfortunately enough work to go around for all of us. And because they are more resource rich, they're able to fully investigate those types of cases much better than we would be able to on a local realm, because they literally go out and fly to where these different young women were brought from. And we just don't have the resources to do that. Now, as on the service provider end, there's International Women's House, which is a great resource for a lot of the trafficked international population. And to not get too political, we do have a current issue where there are certain provisions that if somebody was brought here illegally, that typically in the past they could have gotten visas to stay in the country if we validate that they were in fact victims of a crime. But now that may not be a resource that we have here, specifically in DeKalb County and some other areas, because they are looking to see whether they're classified as a sanctuary city or not before approving whether or not visas will be provided for crime victims. And so that's another issue that we're having to deal with when it comes to dealing with the immigrant population. But there are some similarities to those types of trafficking cases and the domestic trafficking cases. I think that a lot of attention goes to the international cases simply because it's kind of the Hollywood version, right? It's the Taken, it's whatever that you kind of imagine this issue to look like. But when we say, no, it's the girl who's a throwaway, which is the term for kids who have run away so much that parents stop even filing the reports on them anymore, that's what our problem looks like. And those kids matter just as much as those kids who were brought over here. Maybe tricked, deceived, kidnapped, whatever it may be. So yes, they are being dealt with, but different agencies handle those cases.
So we have two more questions. I want to be mindful of folks' time, and we still have a couple of other people who need to say something. So.
Jada, from one survivor to another, I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm honored to call you my sister, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you for that.
Hi, good evening. I'm Carrie Hardy, and this question is for Ms. Racine. I was just wondering, in the beginning, you addressed how when you're in court, African-American women judges oftentimes can be very stringent and very hard-hearted when it comes to these cases. So I'm guessing, I guess that I'm asking from like a litigation standpoint, how do you convey the magnitude of a situation to a judge? Because you're talking about like saying, well, if they look like you, this wouldn't be an issue, but they do look like them. So how do you handle that, you know, from
in litigation talking to a Black female judge who has no sympathy for this young woman?
So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily all of the Black female judges or all the white male judges or whatever. It's definitely by personality and sometimes situational. But to answer your question, I think number one, I need to leave that courtroom with clear conscience that I've done everything that I can to portray what this really is to that judge. Number two is if we see that we have a chronic problem with an individual judge, then that's when we contact the community to say, you might want to come see this. And so if we do have chronic issues, we will do that. But I really feel like if we do everything that we can and we have a clear conscience that we have done what we can, it's on them at that point. They're the ones who have to be able to go to sleep at night with the decisions that they've made. And judges are elected. So that's another thing.
Good evening, and thank you all so much for sharing your stories. My name is Kimberly Rice. I have an organization that actually goes into the strip club, and when people hear that, they automatically equate strip club and sex trafficking together. It doesn't automatically mean that there's sex trafficking going on in a club, but it can occur. So my question to you all is, what connection have you seen or the relationship with strip clubs and sex trafficking here in Atlanta?
I've been there. I've done that. We have to give it, it's really the owners, the strip club owners, because some girls can come in there and they don't even have to have an ID. Like usually you have to get a permit to go dance or whatever. Some girls, he will let just a pimp can pay him under the table. And they'll come in at late at night, even though the officers come in during the day to do the permit check, you know. But at 12 o'clock, they can do whatever they want to do. And I still have connections. I still visit because I still try to help some of my friends out there. And it's like, it's really worse now than it was when I was in it. And so it's like, special offer on 4th and Industrial. So if you, to them, money talk. So it doesn't matter if they 15, 12. As long as they look the part, they can get in. So it's really up to the owners. We really need to be strict on the strip club owners.
I want to piggyback off of that. I have had several meetings and interactions with owners of adult entertainment, strip clubs, gentlemen clubs, whatever you want to call them. And I've been invited to like company picnics to show me that the people involved are doing this willingly. I've been asked to kind of tone it down. It can be a very kind of sticky dynamic. I received phone calls telling me to back off because I'm messing with their money. We're talking about a $32 billion plus business. But am I afraid? No. I have been consulted by a large franchise that have strip clubs throughout the U.S. And they asked me to come in and just have conversations with their girls to make sure that they're safe. And so I could be that point of contact. And I look at that as a privilege because not all are doing that. I have been flown out of state to visit strip clubs just to do a periodic check the temperament of the people dancing. I sit there, they know who I am, and I just watch. I watch the dynamics, I watch the entertainment, but I'm very attentive to the eye contact because that tells me a lot.
Sir Charles, who's one of the most infamous pimps in the Atlanta area, used strip clubs as a grooming tool. So he would get his girls, recruit them from the AUC, and then bring them over to the strip clubs and tell them if they're going to be high fashion models, they need to be comfortable in their own skin. So get naked, get on the stage. what we've also seen is dumping grounds. So when, for whatever reason, a girl's not working with a pimp anymore, even if she is still working with a pimp, they will often have them go there because it's an easy way to get buyers. It's an easy way to make good money. It's an easy way to do all these things that they're saying, well, the benefit is at least you don't have to give it up. At least you just have to get naked. And so we do see it from both angles, the start, the finish, and even during. And so they do, I think, play side by side and intertwine and intersect throughout the process.
And I would say we keep record, if possible, of a pathway to entry, and that is definitely a pathway to entry for a lot of the women that we serve. That's the way that they were introduced to the industry and got started with it. And then as a psychological ploy, it's one step further over and over that they thought they would never make.
And there's a great YouTube video called No Bigger Lie. It was actually a strip club owner who talks about how he does the mental manipulation on all of his dancers, and the closeness that has with a pimp exploiter is uncanny and it's unnerving. And so to say, oh, well, at least they're just stripping, is, you can no longer say that with clear conscience, I feel, after you watch that and see how controlling it can be in those environments.
So, this has been such a powerful evening. I don't always love my job, but most of the time I do, because it does provide me an opportunity to have a platform to share information and to tell important stories. And this was a story that needed to be told. Thank you. I really want to thank everyone sitting on this panel. It is so brave to share, to open yourself like that, and share something so personal. And for most of us, we have no frame of reference for a life like that. And so thank you, Jada. Dorsey has been extraordinary. But thank all of you for the information that you provided, Tupiza, for sharing. It's hard to talk about your child, you know. For all of you, for the information that you shared. This was not an information gathering session. This was an action session. There are so many things you can do. You volunteer, you donate, you sign up. Do not leave here without a plan or you wasted your time. This is a big enough issue. When I thought about the Super Bowl, my stomach just turned because I just thought about what that's going to look like. And I'm happy that we will be involved, but we're not going to be the only ones that are going to be involved, because I want folks to know, don't come down here looking for children. Don't do it, because it's not going to work the way you think it's going to work. And so I'm excited about that opportunity. Let me just say again, this has been such a girl power event. But let me just say, first of all, that you always support the one who supported you first. And so, again, this has been in my head since I heard Dorsey speak some years ago, and I've been trying to figure out how I was going to pull this together. And so I belong to a giving circle called For Her, which is part of Fund for Southern Community. And we chip in, a group of us, and every year we decide what it is that we're going to work on. But I tend to not mix my business with my community stuff. And so I was really just brainstorming to say, I'm trying to put this thing on, help me figure out how to do this, and they were my first supporters. And so because of that, I would like to ask Elisa Smallwood to come up and just provide a few words about For Her. She's the Vice President for Development at the Grady Health Foundation, and in that role, fundraising, yada, yada, yada. Please welcome Ms. Smallwood.
I mean, this is so powerful, it seems irrelevant. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Ford, for putting this together, and thank all of you for coming here tonight. I do bring greetings on behalf of For Her, a Black women giving movement for Black girls. For Her is a group of Black women who give their time, their talent, their treasure, and testimony to support events like this that raise awareness on the issue of sexual exploitation. We also support nonprofit organizations that are providing support opportunities and services to Black girls who are survivors of and vulnerable to sex trafficking and abuse. 15 years ago, when our founder, Natasha Harrison, worked in a residential home for girls, she saw the effects of sexual exploitation firsthand. This issue has grown into a multi-billion-dollar underground economy that is not slowing down. The predators are more aggressive than ever, but so are we. What we've heard tonight has to be shared if this is going to get any better and if it's going to change the outcomes for our children. We have to make this issue a commonplace conversation. So I ask that you please share everything that you've learned tonight with your family and your friends. This issue affects all of us, and it will take all of us to get rid of it. If you want to be more engaged, I encourage you to stop by the For Her table tonight, or please go to our website, www.supportforher.org. Again, thank you for your participation, and please continue to stay vigilant for our children.
So this is by no means an exhaustive list of resources. Those are just some things I threw up there. Most of them have tables out there. There are a number of different ways. All of you with your little cell phones, yes, take a picture of it so you don't have to write it down. I'm just learning that. But I really, nobody should leave here without a plan, some kind of way. Everybody has something that they can do, even if it's just as simple as donating clothes to the shelter. Thank you all so much. I'm sure that the panel will be happy to come and talk with you after, but please, I really encourage you to buy those books. Read That Girl Interrupted. It's a quick read, but it is very powerful. And most importantly, love on your kids. Make sure that your household is safe. Make sure that they know that there's nothing they can tell you that will make you not want to protect them, not want to love them. And watch out for your neighbors and your neighbors' children and your neighbors' children, because when we have to say a village, it is really a village. You cannot turn your head away and not be involved anymore. It just doesn't work. Thank you.